my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello, BYWG Podcast Drive. This is Dr. Noah. For the month of April 2019, the book of the month is Kate Northrup's new release, Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for the busy mom. And the product of the month is BYWG's very own Probiotic Power supplement, which is available with the 10% discount code Probiotic Power 10. Folks, it's case sensitive, so it's capital PROBIOTIC, capital POWER 10. As a reminder, as always, all the links for the product of the month and the book of the month will be listed in the show notes in iTunes, in our weekly newsletter, and on our website at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com at the Listen Now tab. As mentioned, our book of the month is Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for busy moms by Kate Northrup. Dr. Mike had the distinct honor to interview Kate for our podcast, and it can be heard in the month of April through the many channels our podcast is available on: iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or through our website at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com. The product of the month is one of BYWG's truly unique, truly premium supplements, Probiotic Power. Probiotic Power is a shelf-stable, comprehensive probiotic with a whopping 25 billion CFUs in each capsule, meaning it's very potent, and includes 9 of the most beneficial bacterial strains from the Lactobacillus and Bifidobacter families. For the month of April, the 10% discount code is capital PORBIOTIC, capital POWER 10. In the archives of our podcast on our website, you can listen to the comprehensive review of all 8 of our supplements, and in the month of April, one podcast release will be solely dedicated to Probiotic Power. Enjoy the upcoming podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. I'm your co-host today, Dr. Mike Akinfora, and today I am thrilled to have with me Kate Northrup on the show. Kate's written a fantastic book called Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for busy moms. Kate, let me just give everyone your bio real quick, and then we'll get right into the show. With a community of over 250,000 members across the world and a 7-figure business built within the Do Less framework, Kate Northrup is paving the way for women to add more of themselves into their days and create that space for what matters most. Kate's work has been featured by the Today Show, Yahoo Finance, Women's Health, Glamour, and the Huffington Post, and she's spoken to audiences of thousands with Hay House, Wanderlust, USANA Health Sciences, and more. Kate, welcome to the show. So, Kate, that is a very short bio that I read. Could you flesh that out a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got started in business, honestly, when I was a teenager. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always been a very hard worker and was raised in New England with a very puritanical work ethic of, work harder and put in more hours. I was raised by 2 doctors. And it wasn't until I got pregnant with my first daughter that it was, the first time that I had experienced something that I couldn't get through just by pushing harder or working harder or putting in more effort. I just was so tired during the pregnancy. And my husband and I run our own company, and so I wasn't able to work the amount that I had worked prior to that, and my work hours actually were cut basically in half. And then but we were going to become parents, and we needed to figure out how to get the same results with basically far less effort. And the spoiler is that we did figure out how to do that somewhat by accident. After our first year of parenthood, our business was actually remained steady despite massively cutting back on our work hours. And so that is where the work that I'm doing now, teaching about managing our energy and more effectiveness, came into play. And so that's where my new book came from.
Awesome. And just to let people know again, it's Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for busy moms. And I don't think you could possibly have picked a better topic at this point in time in the world, because it seems like there's never enough time.
Yeah, I mean, we hear it all the time. I just wish there were more hours in the day. And we have so much information coming at us and so many possibilities. I mean, with social media and the internet and Google and just having all the information we want at our fingertips, we're now living in overwhelm. And that's created an addiction to thinking that the only way to be valuable or the only way to use our time well is to constantly be doing and constantly be producing. But if we live that way, not only does it really take a toll on our health, it also takes a major toll on our happiness. And what the data is showing is that actually the less we work, the more effective we are, because overworking, even just 49 hours a week of work every week, which I'm sure most people listening have put in 49-hour weeks. It's not ridiculous. That takes a major toll on our mental health, especially in women. And overworking is associated with increased risk of heart disease and all kinds of issues. And so what's really interesting is that on the flip side of that, what is shown is that none of us is able to focus for more than 3 to 4 hours on things that really move the needle. So 3 to 4 hours a day. And it's actually somewhere between 24 and 32 hours a week where we're actually effective and productive. And after that, there's a real diminishing rate of return, and then we just are sitting at our computers, not really getting anything done particularly.
Wow. Let's before I want to unpack that, but before we do, talk to me a little bit about how men and women manage their time differently.
Well, so it's really interesting. So both men and women have these 4 specific phases that they experience in a cyclical way, and I'll tell you what they are in a minute. But men experience them in a cycle over a 24-hour period, whereas women experience them in a cycle over a 28-day period. And we all know that because of the menstrual cycle. But what's so interesting is that our world is set up, of course, assuming that everybody's energy is the same as it was the day before in this 24-hour period cycle. But it's not actually set up optimally for women, and this is based on our hormones. So the 4 phases are they're the same as the seasons, and this is no mistake. We are mirrors of Mother Nature, and so the 4 phases are sort of the springtime of the day, if you're a man, or of the month, if you're a woman, the summertime, that kind of full bloom, high energy time. And then there's an autumn of your month as a woman or of your day as a man. And then there's a winter. And it's really important as women to understand this, because if you're listening and you are a woman who has ever felt like whatever time management system you've tried or used, it just doesn't quite work, it's because all the time management systems are set up assuming that you cycle every 24 hours, which no woman on the planet does.
Right.
So
right.
So it's really important to start to get to know your cyclical nature and to organize your life differently depending on which time of the month it is. And even if you're not cycling, by the way, because the moon has these exact same four phases. And so I recommend that we track the moon as well, to just fall into, okay, we have these different energies throughout the month. How can we reorganize our tasks and reorganize our lives so that they're actually reflecting the kind of energy we have at different times of the month?
I love it. I really, that's neat. And it's so true. Let's unpack the working less and increasing or improving our happiness, because nobody's really talking about that. And it makes sense to say it, but tell me what the data says about that.
Yeah, so the data says that actually our highest rates of happiness are when we work about a 6-hour day. So that's really interesting because that's less than most of us work. The average work week in the United States is actually 47 hours a week. But what's really shown is that we really can't be in a high state of concentration, and that when we are really working 6 hours we are working 6 hours a day,
mm-hmm.
then our focus improves. And as a result, our happiness improves, and companies and countries that are implementing this, like Sweden, is actually moving towards a 6-hour work day. And what they're finding is that companies who do this, they just are minimizing distractions, so their workers are staying off social media, minimizing meetings during the day, and that the reduction in hours hasn't reduced their productivity, but it's actually increased their staff's happiness. And as a result, there are fewer office conflicts, which of course saves a ton of time and energy, and people are able to exercise, be with their families, and pursue passions outside of work. So the company's still doing great, just as great actually, and everyone else is happier too, which is very cool.
You know, it's interesting because that you spoke about your upbringing in New England and that Puritan work ethic. Like, we'll just keep working. Well, we have time to rest. You know,
Yeah.
We have time to rest when we're dead and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the data doesn't support it.
No, the data does not support it. I mean, in fact, there was an op-ed in the New York Times that showed that better work, so like your quality of your work actually gets done in a 4-day schedule rather than a 5-day schedule, because the compressed schedule forces us to focus on what's important and not waste our time on the non-important.
Interesting. That's fascinating. How does that fit into abundance in the natural world too?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. I love this quote from Lao Tzu that says, "Nature never rushes, yet everything gets done." So, you know, the natural world is an incredibly abundant system. There really are enough resources to go around for all the plants and animals on the planet. Human beings, we have a hoarding problem with those resources, but they're just misdistributed. There are enough. And so when we look at that, we begin to realize that things don't get wasted in nature, right? Like the leaves fall off the trees in the fall, and then they get decomposed into earth, which then adds nutrients to the ground, which then allows the other plants and flowers and trees to then grow again in the springtime. So there is this cyclical nature of things where everything has a purpose, and there's nothing that's a waste. You know, in all of ecosystems, everybody plays a part, which is why, you know, in certain places, let's say they begin in a national park killing off the wolf population, then all of a sudden the deer population spikes, and all of a sudden now the plant species are suffering. Like, if we throw something off, it all is interconnected. And I think that's really important to remember in our lives, that each piece that we allow into our lives, each relationship, each project, each task, each belief system that we allow into our lives will affect the whole, because we don't want to have anything in there that hasn't been consciously included, hasn't been consciously chosen.
So you hit on another point, and when you're talking about projects, talk to me about deliberate breaks in your projects and why they're so important.
So I have a system that I created based on looking at the natural world, looking at women's menstrual cycles, and looking at the moon, and noticing that all of those things have the same 4 phases, which, as I had mentioned, the men experience these 4 phases hormonally throughout every 24-hour day. And so I created a system for managing my projects according to this, because I figured if a monthly cycle has these 4 phases, every one of my projects will have them as well. And so I'm using it as a creative blueprint. And so these 4 phases are, one is emergence, which is kind of like the springtime of your project. It's when you're brainstorming and you're initiating things and you're planning. And the next one is visibility, which is really when let's say you're at the pitch meeting, you're leading the workshop, you're on the podcast, you're actually going live with whatever it is that you're creating. And then there's the culmination phase. And the culmination phase is really important because a lot of us skip this phase because we're just so ready to move on to the next thing. But culmination is critical to get the biggest results because it ensures that you are integrating the information that you learned as you launched the project, and you're actually doing a post-game analysis and saying, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what are our metrics here, and really wrapping things up and completing the project so that there aren't any loose ends hanging out there. And then finally, there's the fertile void, which is really the winter time of the project cycle, and it's the pause between rushing right from one thing into the next thing. And during that pause, that's the time to integrate new information. That's the time to rest. That's the time to look at, okay, what's the research, what's working, what's not working, and ensure that you are taking that in so that you don't just keep spinning in circles, but that instead it's more like a spiral staircase whereby each time you go through each of the phases, you're actually making upward progress because you're taking the time to learn what you need to learn and integrate what you need to integrate. And when we use this model for our projects and take adequate breaks, then our work actually becomes far more powerful so it's kind of like the idea that if you over-farm the soil, your crops are not as nutrient dense. They become not as good. And so the same thing happens with our work. When we do too many things too close together, over time, the quality of our work suffers and also our ideas suffer, our creativity suffers. So when you use the upward cycle of success, you actually have fewer harvests, metaphorically, but they're more plentiful. So you're able to do less, but what you're actually devoting your time and attention to is that much more powerful, and you get that much more results with less effort.
I love that visual of, instead of circles, a spiral staircase. That's brilliant. I love that. It hits the mark. Let me ask you a question. I know yourself, you do a lot of projects. You've written books in the past. Have you found for yourself what that rhythm is that works best for you? Is there a certain time period? Is it more organic? How does that work for you?
Yeah, so for me, I'm pretty intentional about my scheduling. So I have a weekly planning ritual that I do, either on Sunday night, depending on how much energy I have after a weekend with my two small children. And during that time, I really look at what projects are on my plate and which phase of the upward cycle of success are they in, so that I know that I need to prioritize the projects that are either in emergence or moving towards visibility. But then I also am looking ahead at scheduling future projects and knowing that we need several days of culmination or fertile void time, or even, a week or 2 weeks, depending on how intense the last project was that we did. I do also schedule my days individually. I know for me, I'm just more energized and more focused from about 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Mm-hmm. So I've really looked at my own productivity from the perspective of Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule, that 80% of our results will come from 20% of our actions and activities. So I have scheduled my 20%, which for me is writing, creating content, and some connecting, although I'll do a lot of that in the afternoon because I need that focus time for my content creation. I schedule that in the morning because I know that that's my most focused time. And that works really, really well for me so that I don't need as much time to get the same amount done as I would if I was scheduling it in the afternoon when I'm kind of getting a little more drained and just not quite in the headspace for focused creation.
Gotcha. That's brilliant. I want to talk to you a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, which is sleep. And why does sleep create more suffering in business and life?
Well, lack of sleep is such an issue. I mean, this whole thing, I think, luckily, Arianna Huffington and her sleep revolution has done a lot to heal our sleep deprivation and sort of this badge of honor that people wear of, lack of sleep. But the data is so shocking. We really have trouble integrating long-term and short-term memory if we're not sleeping. It leads to anxiety, poor mental health, lower IQ. I mean, if you're sleep deprived, you're just not as smart, which is really kind of rough. And you're just not going to be able to be focused or productive, and over time your health really, really, really will suffer. And so I talk about that sleep is my spiritual practice. People will ask about, do you have a spiritual practice? And honestly, for me, it's sleep because it literally heals everything. It heals everything in my body. It heals everything in my heart. During sleep, your cells are getting repaired. Your physical wounds are healed. Your immune system is strengthened. Your muscles grow. Your hormones are synthesized. And when you have a lack of sleep, it actually increases your likelihood of an accident. You lose brain tissue. You lose focus. You lose memory. And it increases your likelihood of being emotionally reactive and unable to produce appropriate responses. And if you are like that long term, it really takes a toll on your relationships, which not only is massive heartache, it actually is a huge waste of time, because interpersonal drama is a huge time suck.
Absolutely.
Like fielding the phone calls and having the conversations. And it's like, it would be great to just be sane and present from the beginning. And not have all that drama.
Absolutely. I tell, our audience knows my backstory. I was my most unhealthy when our first daughter, Emma, was born. She was colic for 5 years. She did not sleep Kate did not sleep through the night for 5 years. And I can remember my wife saying, I had a conference to go to, and she said to me, I will break her. When you get back, she'll be sleeping through the night. And when I came home that weekend, she was on the porch crying with my daughter in her car seat. And we would literally drive the Jersey Shore. And Emma would fall asleep immediately. And I would drive all the way down to one end and all the way back. And I would, like, it's a Sunday night at 11 o'clock, and the cops would pull me over, and I would say, hey, listen, guys, if you wake her, you're taking her. Because we'd put her in a car seat, in her snowsuit, and she was the most happy. We'd leave her in the crib, in her car suit, in her snowsuit, in the seat, and just let her try and sleep, and inevitably she would wake up. But I was 300 pounds. I was 300 pounds, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, all of it. I mean, I'm 190 now, so thank God. She is sleeping.
Wow. It's so brutal in those early years. It's really hard.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting. I was literally talking to one of my patients today who is a police officer, like my dad was, and we were talking specifically about sleep because cops do not sleep. Like, they average. He goes, well, how much sleep do you get, Mike? I said, I get 8 hours. I am at the top of my game with 8 hours. He goes, I don't think I've slept 8 hours in 25 years.
Oh, no.
I said, well, we've got to help you get better because, like you said, everything gets fixed when you sleep. So if you're not doing that, then what's happening is we age, and we age poorly.
Yep.
So I'm glad that you brought that up as well. So Kate, I'm very cognizant of your time. I really just had one more question. I hope that's okay.
Sure, of course.
Okay. So talk to me, what are the biggest regrets that in your research that you found of folks that are dying and how we go about scheduling our time?
Yeah, this is so interesting. So this is based on the work of Bronnie Ware, and she wrote a book called The 5 Biggest Regrets of the Dying. And this is based on her work as a palliative care nurse, working with dying people every single day. And what was so interesting, so the 5 regrets were that folks wished that they had had the courage to live a life more true to themselves rather than a life others expected of them. They wished they hadn't worked so hard. So that's like the big dinger for today's conversation. They wished they'd had the courage to express their feelings. They wished they'd stayed in touch with their friends. I mean, how many of us aren't staying in touch with our community because we think we don't have enough time? And then they wish they'd let themselves be happier. So the question really to ask yourself is, are you delaying your happiness so that you can get more done? And like, what do you think is on the other side of that? You know, so these are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves, because getting more done, nobody is regretting on their deathbed that they didn't get enough done.
I love
it. So we really have to be looking at our lives are today. Like, this is what we have this time today. So how are we going to make it joyful? How are we going to make it meaningful? And because that's all we have.
Absolutely. I usually, when a mom comes in to see me, like yourself, with 2 young children, one of my questions is, what do you do for yourself that brings you joy and happiness? And
a lot of things.
Good. That is my question to you. What do you do for yourself to bring yourself joy and happiness?
Well, I get outside, I move my body, I go to dance class, I watch funny shows with my husband after the girls go to bed. I eat great food, we do date nights, you know, I'll practice yoga from time to time, and then I'll take breaks. You know, I'm a huge believer in spending time with my husband and spending time by myself or with my girlfriends. You know, last week I went and spent the night in Boston with some girlfriends, and we went to a 7 a.m. dance party called Daybreaker. And so I just, you know, I do not believe that my girls would be better off with me spending 24/7 with them if I'm depleted. And there's no way I can spend all my time with them and not be depleted. So I'm about the village. And we have a lot of wonderful community, family, friends, and caregivers who my girls love, and I want them to feel safe and loved by a lot of people, not just me and my husband. And so that's been really important to cultivate since the beginning, because I know that I am not built for 24/7 hands-on parenting.
Yeah, I don't think it teaches our children. I don't think it gives them the right message. You know, when you're doing everything, they've got to see that mommy is doing for herself. They have to see that. I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
Cool.
It really is. And I want my girls to take care of themselves if they ever have kids one day, or even if they don't. Like, I want them to know that they are worth that.
Yeah, one of my friends, we were talking the other day, and we were just talking about, as a new mom, what are you doing for self-care? What do you do for yourself for self-care? Because you've got to start that basically from day one. And she like yourself, she makes sure that she does for herself. And that's not selfish. That's living life at the fullest, expressing herself as fullest human experience.
Yes.
So, Kate, I am really appreciative of you taking your time with us today. Is there any last words you want to impart on our tribe?
You know, it's really to know that the way you use your time and invest your time is going to be an extension of your feelings of worthiness. And so it's just a great inquiry to be in around what you think is worth your time and what you think is you are worthy of. And when you get into that conversation with yourself and with your time, your life will open up. You'll be able to not only save time and make more money, but also have a lot less stress and more satisfaction.
Awesome. We will need to talk another time about worthiness and self-worth, because that's a huge one, a huge one on the list. So, folks, Kate, I really appreciate you being on the show. Folks, if you've liked what you heard, please tell someone or go to iTunes and leave a review for us. It helps us to help others find us. And I want to thank you again, Kate. Have a great day. I'll see you soon, guys. Ciao.